Okay, good morning, class. Hope everyone thought the test last week was okay. I'm actually going to be posting a separate video to go over the test results so that it will be in its own little module and will not be included in this little section, but it will be available today for you to review. So what we're going over today is entrepreneurial leadership, and I call this first module kind of the basics, and we use some embedded videos and some other things to help get you guys an understanding of what, from my perspective, I believe is important from an entrepreneurial leadership perspective. If you think back through kind of the semester and what we've covered so far from blocks of exams, our first exam kind of covered all of this introduction stuff, right? Like, what is an entrepreneurial mindset? What is networking? What are some of the things that you have to do? What makes up a good idea? Then we did a whole block on needs analysis and customer validation. Does your idea work? Do customers think that you might have something worthwhile worth talking about? Then we jumped into the numbers and pricing, which was your last test, and how do I fund my idea? That was the test you just had. So if you think about it from a what you need to learn perspective, you've kind of got an idea, you understand now how to do the numbers on it, you understand how to validate it. Now what we're actually going to transition a little bit into is, well, how do I, what are some of the personal characteristics or personal traits that I need to have to actually be able to run a business effectively? And so that's what this whole next block's going to be about, kind of leadership things, accountability things, responsibility things, a little bit on ethics, and then we're going to talk about how you would put together maybe a presentation and a little bit of work on just some overview stuff like legal, accounting, and I actually call it kind of other stuff you might need to know about. Then you'll have an exam on this block, which will then lead you in to your final. So again, I know that this COVID-19 stuff has certainly made situations challenging, and I appreciate everyone kind of bearing with us as we try to learn through videos. I will try to keep it as interesting and exciting as possible. If you think about entrepreneurial leadership, right now might be probably one of the more challenging times for entrepreneurs when it comes to leadership. If you think about it, the economy was roaring going through the end of last year and entering this year, and all sorts of businesses were just doing really, really well. And then something totally uncontrollable enters your landscape. And that uncontrollable thing that entered the business landscape was a health situation. Most business owners have very little ability to actually control that entering their environment, their business environment. And then if you think about it, government then came in and said, not only do you have these potential health challenges, but now government is saying, we're going to shut cities down, we're going to shut states down. The federal guidelines now are that we're going to kind of keep everything closed through April 30th. For a small businessman, even large business people, this is a massive challenge. And if anything else is going to stretch entrepreneurial leadership and their ability to be good leaders to kind of new levels. I think when you listen to this next TED Talk that I have, you'll understand kind of why I've inserted it in here from a timeliness perspective.
There's a man by the name of Captain William Swenson who recently was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions on September 8th, 2009. On that day, a column of American and Afghan troops were making their way through a part of Afghanistan to help protect a group of government officials, a group of Afghan government officials who'd be meeting with some local village elders. The column came under ambush and was surrounded on three sides. And amongst many other things, Captain Swenson was recognized for running into live fire to rescue the wounded and pull out the dead. One of the people he rescued was a sergeant, and he and a comrade were making their way to a medevac helicopter. And what was remarkable about this day is, by sheer coincidence, one of the medevac medics happened to have a GoPro camera on his helmet and captured the whole scene on camera. It shows Captain Swenson and his comrade bringing this wounded soldier who'd received a gunshot to the neck. They put him in the helicopter, and then you see Captain Swenson bend over and give him a kiss before he turns around to rescue more. I saw this, and I thought to myself, where do people like that come from? What is that? That is some deep, deep emotion when you would want to do that. There's a love there. And I wanted to know, why is it that I don't have people that I work with like that? You know, in the military, they give medals to people who are willing to sacrifice themselves so that others may gain. In business, we give bonuses to people who are willing to sacrifice others so that we may gain. Yeah, back. Right? So I asked myself, where do people like this come from? And my initial conclusion was that they're just better people. That's why they're attracted to the military. These better people are attracted to this concept of service. But that's completely wrong. What I learned is that it's the environment. And if you get the environment right, every single one of us has the capacity to do these remarkable things, and more importantly, others have that capacity too. I've had the great honor of getting to meet some of these who we would call heroes, who've put themselves and put their lives at risk to save others. And I asked them, why would you do it? Why did you do it? And they all say the same thing, because they would have done it for me. It's this deep sense of trust and cooperation. So trust and cooperation are really important here. The problem with concepts of trust and cooperation is that they are feelings, they're not instructions. I can't simply say to you, trust me, and you will. I can't simply instruct two people to cooperate, and they will. It's not how it works. It's a feeling. So where does that feeling come from? If you go back 50,000 years to the Paleolithic era, to the early days of Homo sapien, what we find is that the world was filled with danger. All of these forces working very, very hard to kill us. Nothing personal. Whether it was the weather, lack of resources, maybe a saber-toothed tiger, all of these things working to reduce our lifespan. And so we evolved into social animals, where we lived together and worked together in what I call a circle of safety, inside the tribe, where we felt like we belong. And when we felt safe amongst our own, the natural reaction was trust and cooperation. There are inherent benefits to this. It means I can fall asleep at night and trust that someone from within my tribe will watch for danger. If we don't trust each other, if I don't trust you, that means you won't watch for danger. Bad system of survival. The modern day is exactly the same thing. The world is filled with danger, things that are trying to frustrate our lives or reduce our success, reduce our opportunity for success. It could be the ups and downs of an economy, the uncertainty of the stock market. It could be a new technology that renders your business model obsolete overnight. Or it could be your competition that is sometimes trying to kill you. It's sometimes trying to put you out of business, but at the very minimum, is working hard to frustrate your growth and steal your business from you. We have no control over these forces. These are a constant, and they're not going away. The only variable are the conditions inside the organization. And that's where leadership matters, because it's the leader that sets the tone. When a leader makes the choice to put the safety and lives of the people inside the organization first, to sacrifice their comforts and sacrifice the tangible results so that the people remain and feel safe and feel like they belong, remarkable things happen. I was flying on a trip, and I was witness to an incident where a passenger attempted to board before their number was called. And I watched the gate agent treat this man like he had broken the law, like a criminal. He was yelled at for attempting to board one group too soon. So I said something. I said, why do you have to treat us like cattle? Why can't you treat us like human beings? And this is exactly what she said to me. She said, sir, if I don't follow the rules, I could get in trouble or lose my job. All she was telling me is that she doesn't feel safe. All she was telling me is that she doesn't trust her leaders. The reason we like flying Southwest Airlines is not because they necessarily hire better people, it's because they don't fear their leaders. You see, if the conditions are wrong, we're forced to expend our own time and energy to protect ourselves from each other. And that inherently weakens the organization. When we feel safe inside the organization, we will naturally combine our talents and our strengths and work tirelessly to face the dangers outside and seize the opportunities. The closest analogy I can give to what a great leader is like being a parent. If you think about what being a great parent is, what do you want? What makes a great parent? We want to give our child opportunities, education, discipline them when necessary, all so that they can grow up and achieve more than we could for ourselves. Great leaders want exactly the same thing. They want to provide their people opportunity, education, discipline when necessary, build their self-confidence, give them the opportunity to try and fail, all so that they could achieve more than we could ever imagine for ourselves. Charlie Kim, who's the CEO of a company called NextJump in New York City, a tech company, he makes the point that if you had hard times in your family, would you ever consider laying off one of your children? We would never do it. Then why do we consider laying off people inside our organization? Charlie implemented a policy of lifetime employment. If you get a job at NextJump, you cannot get fired for performance issues. In fact, if you have issues, they will coach you and they will give you support, just like we would with one of our children who happens to come home with a C from school. It's the complete opposite. This is the reason so many people have such a visceral hatred, sort of anger at some of these banking CEOs with their disproportionate salaries and bonus structures. It's not the numbers. It's that they have violated the very definition of leadership. They have violated this deep-seated social contract. We know that they allowed their people to be sacrificed so that they could protect their own interests. Or worse, they sacrificed their people to protect their own interests. This is what so offends us, not the numbers. Would anybody be offended if we gave a $150 million bonus to Gandhi? How about a $250 million bonus to Mother Teresa? Do we have an issue with that? None at all. None at all. Great leaders would never sacrifice the people to save the numbers. They would sooner sacrifice the numbers to save the people. Bob Chapman, who runs a large manufacturing company in the Midwest called Barry Waymiller, in 2008, he was hit very hard by the recession, and they lost 30% of their orders overnight. Now, in a large manufacturing company, this is a big deal, and they could no longer afford their labor pool. They needed to save $10 million. So, like so many companies today, the board got together and discussed layoffs. And Bob refused. You see, Bob doesn't believe in head counts. Bob believes in heart counts. And it's much more difficult to simply reduce the heart count. And so they came up with a furlough program. Every employee from secretary to CEO was required to take 4 weeks of unpaid vacation. They could take it any time they wanted, and they did not have to take it consecutively. But it was how Bob announced the program that mattered so much. He said, it's better that we should all suffer a little than any of us should have to suffer a lot. And morale went up. They saved $20 million. And most importantly, as would be expected, when the people feel safe and protected by the leadership in the organization, the natural reaction is to trust and cooperate. And quite spontaneously, nobody expected, people started trading with each other. Those who could afford it more would trade with those who could afford it less. People would take 5 weeks so that somebody else only had to take 3. Leadership is a choice. It is not a rank. I know many people at the senior-most levels of organizations who are absolutely not leaders. They are authorities, and we do what they say because they have authority over us, but we would not follow them. And I know many people who are at the bottoms of organizations who have no authority, and they are absolutely leaders. And this is because they have chosen to look after the person to the left of them, and they have chosen to look after the person to the right of them. This is what a leader is. I heard a story of some Marines who were out in theater, and as is the Marine custom, the officer ate last, and he let his men eat first. And when they were done, there was no food left for him. And when they went back out in the field, his men brought him some of their food so that he may eat. Because that's what happens. We call them leaders because they go first. We call them leaders because they take the risk before anybody else does. We call them leaders because they will choose to sacrifice so that their people may be safe and protected, and so their people may gain. And when we do, the natural response is that our people will sacrifice for us. They will give us their blood and sweat and tears to see that their leader's vision comes to life. And when we ask them, why would you do that? Why would you give your blood and sweat and tears for that person? They all say the same thing. Because they would have done it for me. And isn't that the organization we would all like to work in? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, you guys can see from that TED Talk that it's very apropos for our current times, right? I mean, we had 3 point some million jobless claims reported last week, and that number is not accurate because so many state systems were overwhelmed, and the number is actually higher. I mean, California reported 200,000 jobless claims, but they have over 1 million, but they can only report 200,000 because that's all their system could process. So we had over 4 million people last week as new jobless claims out of work. Am I saying that if every entrepreneurial leader or every business leader followed the TED Talk you just listened to's principles and said we're all going to suffer a little bit, that none of them would be out of work? No, I'm not saying that at all, because that is just not possible right now based on the absolute sheer devastation that the economy is facing with nobody out spending money. And that is just the reality of the situation we're in. But it does change maybe a little bit of how some people could think about this. I have a story of, there's a winery owner up outside of Austin who actually at the beginning of this coronavirus problem, when they were told that they were going to have to shut down, pulled all of his employees together and said, you know, we have options. And very similar to what was discussed in that, excuse me, in that TED Talk, he said, you know, I can go through and try to lay off a bunch of people, or we can all go home, talk to our spouses, look at our bills and figure out what is the absolute minimum that we can get by with, and then come back and have another meeting. And I will try to keep every one of you on payroll with at a reduced level to help just kind of keep some income coming into you to help you meet obligations. But all of them as a group committed to calling their banks, calling their mortgage companies, calling all of their creditors and saying, can we buy a month? Can we buy 2 months? Can we buy 3 months before we have to make payments because of the situation we're in? And they all came back and had different amounts. One employee, actually, he reported to me, the owner of the business said he almost broke down in tears, said, well, I don't need any money. I mean, you know, I'm young, I can live with my parents, and they're well off and they're going to provide food for me. So, you know, all of the money that would normally be allocated to me, you can allocate to other employees who have kids. And so that principle and that concept is not unheard of. I know a lot of people listen to that talk and think there's just no way. That's not reality. Nobody would do that. Who would ever do that? And yet there's an example of it happening right now. Right now it already happened. And so if you can create an environment like that, your employees will be very, very loyal to you. So let's go over some of the big points that came out of the TED Talk. Number one, he talked about that environment really matters. It's not about the people. Remember, his first hypothesis was, oh, these must be better people. And in reality, what he figured out, it's not about the people, it's about the environment that's created. If you create a mutual support environment, you can't help but want to be supportive inside of that environment. And so try to think of places where you've in your past had someone else's back or thought, there's no way I'm going to let that person be in that alone. Whether that was on a sports team you were in where, you know, you worked really, really hard to make sure that you didn't let down a teammate, whether that was in a band where you said, you know what, right now I'm struggling with this piece of music and I'm not going to be the one who stands out and makes our band sound bad or our marching band sound bad because I can't figure out my part of it. Whether that is in a dance troupe where you are struggling with a couple of dance steps or you can't learn it, but you're like, I'm going to learn this because I don't want to let the group down. All of us at times in our lives have already been in some sort of environment that is this mutually supportive, everybody's in it together environment. The goal for you as the entrepreneurial leader is to create that kind of environment inside of your organization. Second thing, you can't just say, trust me. And I'm sure all of you, if we were in class, I'd be going around and asking questions of somebody told me sometimes somebody said, hey man, just trust me. And then you got burned or it didn't work out. So all of us know about this, where people are like, you just have to trust me. You can't just say, trust me. You have to show trust and earn trust through your actions. You know, I have this belief that there's kind of two types of people in the world when it comes to trust. There's those, if you think of trust as a deck of cards, There's those people who say, I've met you, here's my entire 52 cards. I trust you. And they give them to you right away. They give you all of their trust. And then your actions either keep those cards or slowly start losing those cards because you prove untrustworthy. And at some point, the person says, wow, I can't trust this person, and they move away. The other type of person is the person who says, I don't know you, I don't trust you at all, I'm not going to give you any of my cards. But as you have actions and as you do things and as you prove trust, you earn those cards one at a time until you possess the entire deck of trust. And so if you think about trust from that perspective, try to make sure as an entrepreneurial leader that you're understanding, who am I dealing with here? Is this a person who's already given me all 52 cards? Man, I really need to make sure that I show them that I'm worth keeping these cards. Is it someone who's giving you no cards and you have to say, you know what, it's okay, they haven't given me any cards. I haven't proven that I'm trustworthy yet. And I'm going to earn those cards from that person and show them through my actions that I'm a trustworthy person, a trustworthy leader. So if you're focusing on those two kinds of things, you can see from the TED Talk that you can't just say, trust me. Third, the circle of safety. When we feel safe, there's trust and cooperation. Really think about that. Just think about some place you feel safe, whether that's your family, a work environment, a team, school, a group of friends, some circle that when you're part of, you feel that you're very safe. If you really think about that, then that is where trust and cooperation happens. If you think about that movie series, and I forget the name of it, but where they had the Mockingjay. If you remember at one point in that movie, there was kind of this loose collaboration of people who had kind of partnered together to try to keep themselves alive and kill the others. And at one point, the main character is sitting back, and one of the collaborators from the other group is sitting with her, and he's like, well, you go ahead and go to sleep first and I'll watch. And she's like, I don't trust you. I'm not going to sleep. You go to sleep first. And he's like, I'm not trusting you. And they both stay awake. That is the perfect example of this. Neither one felt safe. They weren't in a circle of safety. Although they were trying to work cooperatively and they were beginning to build a relationship, they hadn't gotten the trust to the point where one was like, no problem at all. I'll take a nap. Yet the extreme examples of this is the military does this. You're partnered up with one person. You go sit in a hole somewhere in a desert or somewhere in another deployed area, and you're doing that. You are saying, you go ahead and sleep for a few hours, I'll stay awake. You go ahead and sleep for a few hours, now I'll stay awake. And that's because you've got this circle of safety. You have this trust bond that you're like, I know this person has my back and will wake me if there's a problem. And so figuring out that circle of safety is pretty important. He really talks about when leaders make a choice to put employees first, these great things can happen. And that's true. I have this expression that I use a lot in business. And my goal in corporations and companies that I work with is to try to figure out, what does each employee want to accomplish? What are the goals that that employee are trying to reach? Because if I focus all of my efforts on helping that employee reach his goals, the next employee reach her goals. If all employees are reaching their goals, then I, by proxy, am going to reach my goals, because there's no way I can't win if they're all winning. I will win by proxy. And so I really believe leaders make a choice to figure out what are employees about, what are they wanting to do to develop, what goals are they trying to achieve. And when you pour yourself into helping them do that, then you by proxy just will win, because you can't help but win when everyone around you and the team you're on is winning. Kind of like parents, this next piece is pretty important. Discipline when necessary to help an achievement like parents. He talked about this, right? You have to discipline. Now, that doesn't mean at your workplace you can say, go sit in the corner, you haven't done what you've done, go take a timeout. That's not what I'm talking about at all. But this is going to get talked about further on in our module, but we're going to talk about, this is where accountability comes in. When you mutually agree on something with employees and they say, yes, I'm going to go get this accomplished, or I'm going to do this, you have to be able to trust them to do what they've said, just like they're trusting you to do what you said. So it works both ways. If they're not going to get there, you might have to apply a little discipline. That discipline is accountability. And that means that you have to help the employee succeed by saying, wait, we had a conversation. You said you were going to do this. You didn't do it. Let's talk about why. What are our things we can do to remediate? How can we provide training? Is it an environment issue? Do you feel like you don't have the skills, the knowledge, the abilities? Let's work together to try to figure out how to get you on track. Okay, other things. Coach and give support to employees, and I was just talking about that. Part of accountability is not just saying you didn't do it or you didn't accomplish this or why didn't you, although those are all important things to know. It's about figuring out the how to help them get there. So you have to be willing to coach and give support to employees. I bet if I walked around the auditorium and we were all together and I said, how many of you took a job and were kind of thrown into the deep end of the pool and given no training, no coaching, no support, and you were just told to go get something done, that there would be a lot of hands raised, because there typically is. And so make sure that when you're bringing employees on, you have some sort of training program, some sort of ability to help them go accomplish whatever it is that they have decided that they want to accomplish as a member of your team, and that you've decided is important for them to accomplish to help the organization as a whole. Great leaders do not sacrifice people to save numbers. This is a big point that he makes in his presentation. And we already talked about the example with the winery owner who's trying not to sacrifice people to save the numbers. If you think about it, the federal government right now is trying to step in at a huge level to say, we can't sacrifice people to save numbers. I mean, they are talking about programs such as things like, when you get on unemployment, we will give you unemployment at the rate your pay used to be. That's unprecedented. They're talking about, for small business, if you keep people employed, we will make whole for you all of the payroll that you spent, all of the payroll tax, all of your rent, because they're trying to keep people from getting, on the unemployment rolls. So great leaders don't sacrifice people. All sorts of companies right now are having to make very, very difficult choices on what are they doing with people. Are they furloughing them? Are they laying them off? What are they doing? If you think about Tillman Fertitta, he had an article last week in the paper that said, he had to furlough 40,000 employees. But he said, if I don't do this, there will be no company for them to come back to. And so he's kind of saying, yes, I'm having to make a short-term sacrifice so that long-term, there's actually a place for people to come back to and get back to work. So it's not as easy as to say, well, sure, just don't lay anyone off, because there has to be money coming from somewhere to pay them. And as an entrepreneurial leader, these will be some of the biggest things you wrestle with. How much do I invest in people? Can I afford to keep all of them on payroll right now? Should I, do some sort of layoff? I don't think the goal is to say, I have to do what was talked about in the talk. If you think about it, what they actually did in that talk was furloughed people. They all had to take a month furlough, a month of unpaid vacation, and they just figured out how to work together. So I am sure there are lots of companies all over the country that are doing those kinds of things right now. The point of this is you can't be only thinking from a numbers perspective. The people are what are generating the numbers in the first place. So you have to think from a people's perspective. It has to be a very big part of your equation that you're factoring things through. And then this is the counterpoint to that, right? You would rather sacrifice the numbers to save the people. And that's just what we talked about. You might be willing to take lower profits. You might be willing to say, I'm going to have to pull some cash off my balance sheet to finance us through this short-term time. And we're going to be in a worse position. We may have to borrow money and up our leverage, which we would prefer not to do, or up our debt ratio, which we prefer not to do. But it's the way we're going to save our people. And our people are who make our business that we've spent all this time training. So again, might be, some tough decisions, but right now you can see how this entrepreneurial part or this entrepreneurial leadership lesson really applies. Again, he's trying to say that it's better that all suffer a little rather than a few suffer a lot. If you really think about the coronavirus, this statement is why the world is shutting down. Because in reality, they could have let everyone in the world catch it. The vast majority of people, would be fine. They're young, they're healthy, and they would survive and work through it. There might be some sickness. Hospitals would definitely have some, problems dealing with the number of sick coming in. But the few that would suffer a lot would be that entirely, elderly population that are the high risk people. And the world's approach to this has been, we don't want a few. Now, a few would be a lot, but a few from the perspective of how many people there are in the world to suffer a lot. And so we're trying to figure out a way to have everybody suffer a little, which is hard to imagine that the economic devastation we're undergoing right now is considered suffering a little, but it certainly beats having hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of deaths in every country as this virus would have gone through unchecked. Okay, a couple last points. Leadership is a choice. It's a choice, not a rank, not given. You have to choose to be a leader. Just because you're put in charge does not make you a leader. Being put in charge makes you the person in authority, which is exactly what Simon's point was during his talk. It just puts you in authority. It means you have the right to tell people what to do. But isn't it so much better when people are kind of working with you and that they are on your team and they're there because they want to be, and they talk and say wonderful things about the way you lead? Wouldn't that be a much better environment to be a leader of? So you have to make a choice to try to help create that environment. It won't happen on its own. You have to set the conditions that will help create an environment where people want to work there, where people enjoy coming to the office, where people enjoy working together. So you can't just say, well, I'm in charge, so now I'm a leader. Everybody knows the old adage. If you want to see if you're a leader, look over your shoulder and see if anyone's following you. Okay, you don't need authority to be a great leader. John Maxwell actually writes a great book on this, and it's called Leading from the Middle. And you can be an amazing leader inside of an organization without being the authority figure, the person in charge. So find a way to help motivate, to help people around you achieve their goals, even if you are not their boss. You know, look at your coworker and say, what are you trying to get done, Jane? What are you trying to get done, John? Figure out if there's a way that you can help assist them in achieving their goals. If you end up with this mutually supportive environment where everybody is working together to help everybody achieve their goals, the organization as a whole cannot help but be successful. The whole thing will lift and it will be successful. So, and I just talked about this, make a choice. Leadership's a choice. Choose to look out for the person to your left. Choose to look out for a person to your right. And this is really difficult right now in the environment that we kind of live in the United States, and really kind of somewhat across the world, where most people, and we've talked about this before, are so busy listening to the radio station WIIFM, what's in it for me, that they're not listening to what might be good for the person to the right or what might be good to the person for the left, because they're so busy worrying about themselves and only looking at themselves and taking a selfie that makes themselves look great. Look at all the great places I've been, versus saying, you know what can I do to help the person on my right? What can I do to help the person on my left? So a little bit of this is, it's kind of what I've been hitting on this theme all semester. You have to pick your head up. You have to get it out of your phone. You have to get it out of your own world and start looking around you. That's where opportunities are for business, and that's also where leadership opportunities exist as you start to help the people to your left and to your right. You've got to choose to sacrifice for them, because then they'll sacrifice for you. If I say, don't worry about it, go to sleep for an hour, I'll watch your back, you're going to be much more willing to then let me go to sleep for an hour while you watch my back. You have to be willing to put in to get out. You can't just continually be in an environment of, well, somebody owes me, of taking, well, I was this, or I was that, or I didn't have the right opportunity, or I wasn't given the same advantages as somebody else, or I'm just not smart in math, or I'm not smart in English, or I can't write a paper, or if that science stuff, oh my gosh, it blows my mind. You have to figure out how to sacrifice. So if there's somebody and you need tutoring and they're great in math and you're great in English, maybe you could approach them, instead of saying, can you tutor me in math, say, hey, I'm really great in English. Do you have any English challenges I could help you with? Maybe you could then help me with my math challenges. You got to sacrifice for each other. It can't be a one-way street. So again, pick your head up, get it out of your phone, and start looking around you at your environment and figuring out how and where can I impact things around me. We just talked about that. If you don't, why would they give up anything for you? If all you're doing is taking, how long do you think before people are tired of giving to you? At some point, they're going to get tired of it being a one-way street. Okay, that's all I have for today's class. Hopefully you guys will have some points to think about on this. I will have another video posted where we talk about the, as I said at the beginning, where I'm going to go over your class grades from the last test. It'll just be its own little video snippet. My final parting point would be, I looked at the statistics from the first set of videos I posted, and while I was very happy to see that the vast majority of you opened them, I was a little stumped to figure out how most of you could watch them in under 6 minutes, because that was the average time of viewing. So I am going to be increasing the number of questions that come on tests out of the videos, things that aren't on the slides, so that I can ensure you guys are actually getting the entire learning opportunity. So please feel free, as usual, to email me, send me questions, anything that you have. I appreciate all of you guys bearing with us as we learn in this different environment of 100% online learning. And as usual, I miss you guys from class. Have a great day.